Hello friends, welcome to True Crime and Tea. My name is Taylor and today we are going to be covering the Dirty John story, John Meehan, if you will. And this story has gotten really popular over the last couple years. It was fairly recent, of course, like this happened in like 2016, a big portion of it. And there's been like a really popular podcast. There's even been a Netflix or Bravo show about it. I can't remember who made it, but it was really popular and a lot of people have talked about it, and so I definitely wanted to do just like a deep dive into this case because it is so interesting. So go ahead and grab yourself a snack or a hot beverage and we will go ahead and jump right in. Now, to dissect John's criminal and often erratic behavior, we have to go back to the beginning and find out what happened to him as a child to kind of tell the story about what, went on in his life. John Meehan was born February 3rd, 1959. His parents were William and Dolores. He also had two sisters named Donna and Karen. John's family was dysfunctional to say the least. His father was a small-time criminal who, did insurance scams very often, and he often would tell people that he was related to mafia boss Albert Anastasia, but that has never been proven. John's parents actually ended up divorcing in the 70s. His mother was having an affair, and William was often out pulling out all kinds of schemes, trying to make money, taking advantage of people, basically. His mom remarried and had another child, and she ended up passing in 2007. And when I was looking into this and I saw her obituary online, it was really sad because like all of her children said something nice about her except John. Like John's name was not listed. His name was listed as her child, but he didn't like say, I miss you, mom, I love you, mom, or anything like that on her obituary. I thought that was really kind of sad. After this, John became his father's partner in crime. His father would often have him put like little pieces of glass in food at a restaurant, so then the restaurant would have to pay out any insurance claims. His father had him jump in front of a moving car that caused him to like break his leg, and just doing those kinds of things all the time. And once when John just graduated high school, he put a piece of glass in a taco at Taco Bell, and his father's insurance company ended up paying it out and like paying for John to get any medical help he needed after that. But the insurance note said that they believed that the father and son was in on it because it had happened so many times. So it was actually noted like on the claim that they felt that the father and son did it. John attended Prospect High School in Saratoga, California. He was selling cocaine at this point, and he was even arrested at one time, but no charges were given against him. After he graduated from University of Arizona, he actually attended University of Dayton School of Law, and this is where he earned the name Dirty John. He slept with so many women and just did a lot of schemes. Like his friends from college, they would say that he would sell people a car that completely didn't run or that it was dangerous to drive, like gas would be leaking, things like that. He often took out credit cards in other people's names, and because of this reputation he had, he, earned the name Dirty John. Some people even called him Filthy John or even just Filthy. John was a good-looking guy. He had an athletic build, he was tall, he was handsome, and he was very charming. He knew how to bring people in and charm them and get them to trust them, and then he would take advantage, and he did this pretty much his entire life, and he really started a lot of criminal activities on his own in college, like I said, with the credit card schemes and, selling people junky cars and things like that. So he definitely... he knew how to make someone trust him and make someone think like, yeah, I'm your friend and, I would do this for you and do that for you. And then he would completely take advantage, especially of women. This is when his scamming of women really started in college. John met his first wife, Tanya, in the late 80s. She was 25 and he told her he was 26, but he was really 31. So he was completely lying about his age, as well as being, her only partner. He had several other women he was dating at the same time. The two got married in 1990. The only person who actually attended their wedding from John's family was his grandmother. Their marriage lasted 10 years and they had 2 daughters, and John seemed like a really great partner. You know, they worked and got along very well. Tanya even put him through school to be an anesthesiologist, and, you know, they didn't drink, they didn't party. John, you know, played basketball a couple times a week. He seemed like a normal guy. The relationship took a turn for the worse in 2000. John told Tanya he wanted a divorce, and because of this, Tanya really started to notice some of John's erratic behavior, and she just felt kind of uncomfortable around him. So she actually found his mother, who she never met, and this is where she found out John's real name, because he changed his name around her. He lied about his age. She found out all of these things about him, that he had scammed people with their credit cards, and all of this she found out about him. And in September of 2000, Tanya actually found a drug stash in their home that John had been hiding. And Tanya actually reported him to the police and the hospital that he was working. And about 2 years later, John served 17 months in prison for theft of drugs. John was released from prison in 2004, and his sister Donna immediately tried to help him. She had been there for him frequently throughout his life. She paid his child support. She bought him a car. She gave him a place to stay, but he would often take advantage of her and then get very aggressive with her. Donna became very frustrated with John as well, because the first night that she picked him up from prison, he was on a dating site trying to find other women to date immediately. John then decided to move to California, and Donna got him a job at her real estate firm, and he was living in her like personal RV. So she was really taking care of him, but he wasn't happy with this. He didn't like this structured life. Of course, he didn't want to, you know, do the right thing and just have a normal life. He immediately went back to his old schemes. So he basically quit that job, started doing some RV repairs on the lot he was living on. Like, he would fix just other people's like trailers and RVs. And he would also go and get hit by cars on purpose so he could collect insurance money. And Donna and John eventually had a falling out. Donna wanted him to, you know, move out of his RV because all he was doing was taking advantage. He wasn't paying, you know, any rent or even taking care of it. Like, it was a total mess on the inside, and she was getting really frustrated because that was her property. And John tried to take a legal claim out on her, saying that it was his land, it was his RV, and John was harassing her. He was sending emails to her daughter, which would be his niece, you know, threatening to kill Donna. And so they just eventually had a falling out. She just decided to like leave him alone. Donna was extremely suspicious of John. She felt that he had kind of graduated from smaller crimes to bigger things, and she just was not very trusting of him. Mainly because in 1997, their father had gotten cancer, unfortunately, and he was in hospice care. And they were both like there taking care of him, just making sure that he was, you know, okay and being taken care of by the nurses. And Donna left very briefly. She came back, you know, within 5-10 minutes, I believe it was, and their father had passed like within that couple minutes. And the oncologist said that he passed away because someone gave him morphine. And so this has like never been proven or disproven, but she really feels that his father passed away because John gave him something. You know, maybe when no one was looking, he slipped him something really quickly. So she did not trust him. And Donna even said, quote, "My brother wanted any money that was due to him, and my dad's death was, his illness was taking longer than it was supposed to be. He hated my dad," end quote. Because it's interesting though, like, because his dad taught him to do all these things, and maybe if John didn't have a family that was that way, didn't have a father that was always scamming and taking advantage of other people, maybe he would have never started doing that. So it's interesting that he hated his dad so much. Now, Donna actually took a legal case against John. She wanted to get a restraining order, and also she wanted to put like a lien on the RV and the lot it was on because it had a lot of damage and John was not taking care of it. And she said, I quote, "I knew I'd never see that money. But I did it to protect myself because John left me alone after that. It was never the money, it was to leave me alone. It was all I had. To me, that was stronger than a gun, end quote. So I thought that was very interesting, and that was really smart on her behalf because she knew if he owed her money and it was like a legal binding contract that he would never show up again, and she really didn't see him after that, and she actually won that case. So John did end up leaving her completely alone after that. From around 2005 to 2014, John conned and terrorized multiple women. He would lure them in, be very charming. He told all these women he was a doctor, and they all just like fell in love with him. And once he got into their lives and got what he wanted, or if he had trouble getting what he wanted, he would absolutely terrorize them. In 2013, John met a woman named Marilyn, I believe is how you say her name. I'm not 100% sure, but that's how it kind of pronounced it in Google Translate. Her name was Marilyn Anderson, and he met her in Laguna Beach, California. And they actually met at the hospital. She actually just had brain surgery, and John was in the room checking up on her, and he told her he was her anesthesiologist. And she immediately fell for him. Of course, like everybody says, he's very charming, very kind, very sweet. He was very like attentive to her, and they actually started dating. And after a little while, he started to try to extort her out of her money because she was very wealthy. And when it didn't work, the relationship immediately soured. And when he couldn't get that money, he sent intimate photos of her to her entire family. John actually wrote to her and said, quote, "You're in way over your head on this one. Make it happen and I walk away. If not, I will be your nightmare," end quote. John actually broke into her home and she called the police, and they ended up doing a search warrant on a storage unit that he had. They found guns and zip ties and, cyanide powder and all of these things that would be used for like kidnapping someone or maybe murdering somebody. John was arrested on February 14th due to stalking and possession of a firearm. He was actually let out that very next summer on good behavior, but was immediately arrested again due to breaking his restraining order against Marilyn. John was released from prison on October 8th, 2014, and 2 days later he met a woman named Deborah Newell on October 10th. John, of course, met Deborah on a dating site, which was like kind of his calling card. He, wined and dined her. He made her feel really great. And Deborah had been married 4 times previously, and she had just had a really bad string of dates by men who just, didn't fit what she wanted out of life. So, she met John, who was a Doctors Without Borders. He claimed he was working in Iraq for Doctors Without Borders, that he was an anesthesiologist over there, and he had been there for like well over a year, and that he, has been a doctor for many years, and he owned 2 homes, and just, made himself seem very wealthy and a good dad because, he did have 2 daughters who, I'm assuming that he didn't see at all. But, he claimed that he saw them and took care of them, but his wife was jealous. But, he made it seem like he was a really good dad and, of course, a doctor. And so Deborah just immediately fell for him. I mean, it was just the way it was. John was extremely charming. Deborah's children, especially her 2 daughters, Jacqueline and Tara, pretty much immediately showed dislike for John, especially Jacqueline because she lived with Donna. She felt that John was like scoping out the place. She had a very beautiful home. Deborah Newell's very successful. She owns a like interior design company, and so she's doing very well. Her home, was beautiful. She had all kinds of artwork and beautiful furniture everywhere, very expensive clothes and purses. They even had like a safe with their like designer purses in it, and very, very expensive home, right? So they felt that John was like always trying to check everything out. And Jacqueline even said that she felt like John was very dirty, of course, and homeless. Like she felt that he may have been a homeless person. They always saw him in scrubs. He only ever wore scrubs that were really dirty. Like the bottom of the pant leg was always frayed and dirty. And one thing that Jacqueline noticed, because I believe she worked in like the medical field of some kind, I'm not exactly sure, she really stays out of the limelight in this whole situation. She doesn't really do a lot of interviews or anything like that, but she worked in some sort of medical field, and so she would know that a doctor's hands are always very clean. And if you go to your doctor, you're going to notice that right away, because they're touching people and, you know, touching parts of your body that may be uncomfortable. Their hands are always clean. Their nails are always clipped very clean. And John's hands were always really dirty, like junk under his nails. Like he was always just looking really rough. He even showed up to a charity event for cancer with Deborah in scrubs. And Deborah was kind of embarrassed, but she also thought like, well, he's a doctor and he just, you know, got out of surgery. So, you know, she was like really impressed with him. She thought he was like this hardworking man. But, you know, things started to click together, especially with her children right away. You know, he didn't even have a car. He only had the scrubs to wear. He had no other clothes. His shoes were dirty. And like, what type of doctor doesn't have a car, right? Like that just is unheard of. And he even told Deborah and her kids, when he was like confronted about his clothes, that all of his clothes were stolen when he was in Iraq. He quickly started controlling Deborah and her money. After just a couple weeks of knowing each other, he would, you know, suggest to Deborah, let's get a place together. Let's get our own apartment, because Jacqueline didn't like him and he didn't want Jacqueline to blow his cover, and he wanted his own place that he could like seclude Deborah away from her entire family. So they ended up getting their own place, and they actually got like an oceanfront apartment in Newport Beach, California. It was very beautiful, very nice, very like upscale area to live. And Tara, who is Deborah's youngest daughter, came to visit because at the time she was living in Las Vegas with her boyfriend. And so she really didn't know John by this point. She just knew what Jacqueline had told her. And she actually came to their apartment while they were moving in to, you know, help them set up. And it was like up right before Thanksgiving. And John was actually very, very rude to Tara. And it was very uncomfortable for her. He was carrying in like everything into the house, like a mattress and chairs, and he wouldn't allow her or her boyfriend to help. He was being very like macho and like short with them, and he basically was like telling them, we're not ready for you, so come back. Just very, very rude, you know, to them, and that set off red flags immediately, because when you are dating somebody and you meet their family for the first time, you're usually like overly nice. You know, like you are going overboard to make them like you, and you're being very friendly, and that's just kind of what most people do. So it seemed very odd that he was being so short and rude with them right off the bat. And Deborah lied to her children and said that this was just her new home, you know, just kind of like a getaway home for her, and Jacqueline could have her own place and John could come visit her here without Jacqueline having to see her. But they quickly realized that it was, you know, both of their places. All of John's stuff was there, like razors and stuff like that, you know, his own shoes. And so they realized like immediately that he was living there. Now, because Tara was staying at her mom's house for a few days before Thanksgiving, she was helping them like unpack and doing some things, and she actually found some paperwork of John's that stated he was a nurse and not a doctor. And when Tara confronted them, John went nuts, like completely bananas, screaming, getting up in her face. And Tara was like shouting at her mom, you're going to let him talk to me this way? And Deborah did absolutely nothing. She just completely, you know, acted like she wasn't there. She completely ignored it. And John was saying, I'm basically a doctor because I have a PhD and I'm a extensively trained anesthesist. And, you know, he was just lying and making stuff up. And so Tara left, and she was very hurt by this situation because she felt like Deborah was choosing John over her. Deborah and Tara started attending therapy after this incident, and they were, you know, talking to this therapist about John and the issues, and the therapist kind of came to the conclusion that her kids were running her life. That's what it seemed like. And you know, the therapist basically told Deborah, you have to stop letting your kids run your life. You have to make your own decisions. And it was just a very like uncomfortable thing for Tara. And Tara actually made Deborah promise at this therapy session that John would not be around the kids for Christmas. So, if he came, he needed to keep his distance from, the grandchildren, from Deborah's grandchildren, because she felt very uncomfortable, and Tara was very close to these kids, so she didn't want John to be around the children at all. In December, John and Deborah actually got married. She went to a business trip in Vegas, and, we think that he got her drunk and they were just out having fun, and they actually ended up eloping in Vegas. And Deborah didn't want to tell anybody. They, kept it a secret for a little while because she knew that her kids would be very upset with her. And at this point, they had only known each other 2 months. And on Christmas Day, of course, John showed up with a huge bag of toys for the kids, and he was wearing a Santa hat. And Tara got very upset. She was very hurt that her mother allowed John to show up that way when she promised that he wouldn't come near the kids. So of course, all the kids were running up to him and they were playing and talking, and John seemed really good with the kids. So Deborah just didn't understand why Tara was so upset, but she was, crying to the grandmother, to Deborah's grandmother, saying that she didn't trust him and there was something weird about him, and it was just really not a good day overall because there was just a lot of tension. But she was just very upset with her mother about this. And over the next couple months, Deborah fell more and more in love with John, and she really didn't take too much stock in the opinions of her children. And she really didn't know behind the scenes that they were, looking into John. They were trying to hire a private investigator to, find out exactly what was going on with him. In March 2015, Deborah's nephew, Shad, actually, at this point, he thought John was okay. He really didn't understand. He thought John was a little bit like offbeat, but he didn't have any major issues with him, right? And he just thought that maybe Jacqueline and Tara were, maybe making too big of a deal about it, and they were just being judgmental because that was their mom. But at, a lunch date that they had, John made the comment about Jacqueline, "I could take her out from 1,000 yards." And that made Shad super uncomfortable because, he was really close to them. And, he at this point then really started to question John and, question his behavior because he was, being a little bit more violent, saying like odd violent things like that. And Deborah didn't say anything when he said that. She just kind of laughed it off, and that made Shad super uncomfortable. Shad was very close with Deborah. She was like a mother figure to him because in the 80s, Shad's mother had actually been killed by his father, and so he was raised by their grandmother Arlene and Deborah. So, he was very close to her, and he didn't want anything bad to happen to her because that would just hurt him too much and, hurt the grandmother too much. So he definitely was very concerned, and he actually started working with Jacqueline on this private investigator situation. They both put in money and were, calling around and finding other things out about John. So their private investigator actually gave them all of these arrest records and restraining orders that John had. She even found a website called datingpsychos.com. And this was basically like a website that you could go and make profiles for people that you have dated, and you can put stuff on there about them, things that they did, their behavior, so you can kind of watch out for who you're dating. And John had many, many women on there saying he was emotionally needy, he was a parasite, so many terrible things about him. And so they found all this information, and they even called the RV park, the trailer park that John had been living in, and a woman answered the phone and said, "We were in a relationship and now we're not." So they were finding out all of this information on the side while Deborah was just, becoming more and more enamored with John, and they were just in love. And, he just attended to her every little whim and made her coffee every day and these smoothies, and took her cars in for maintenance because she had 2 cars think she had a Tesla, and then I can't remember the other type of car, but it was like a very expensive one. And so he was like doing all of these things for her, and so she just thought he was great. But there were, you know, a couple odd occurrences at the home. On a Sunday, they both came home from church, John and Deborah, and they saw a homeless woman in their home. This woman was just kind of walking around the house. It appeared that she maybe had taken a shower in their home, and so John, like, you know, tackled her down basically and had Deborah call the police. And later on, you know, Deborah said that she felt like maybe John set this up to make him seem more macho, and of course he was involved in all these criminal activities, so he had to know other people that, you know, did those type of things. So maybe did he pay this woman to do that? We don't know, but she feels like John, you know, maybe had some involvement in this. And after this, John wanted security cameras installed everywhere, of course, all over the house. In her job, he was like demanding that she get security cameras in her office at her interior design company, right? So she kind of maybe felt a little bit suspicious about this. She felt like, you know, maybe he is trying to watch me. But this actually worked out in her favor, because then she could watch him. And she started to see that he would get up and get dressed and leave the house for work. And then he would immediately come back and go to bed. Like once Deborah was gone, he would come back and just hang out at the house and play video games all day, or, you know, lay around and watch TV and do whatever he wanted to do. So she would confront him about this and say, like, why didn't you go to work today? And he would make any kind of excuse like, oh, my client's surgery was canceled, so I didn't have to go in. And when you have a job like that, when you're like a doctor, or you have like a very high paying professional job like that, you don't just like have that one thing to do and then that's it. Like, if maybe that particular surgery was canceled, there maybe was other things that you could have done. So that just seems weird to just be like, oh, well, I just don't work today. Because even at like my job, if something happens, you know, that is canceled, like a meeting or something like that, like I still go to work because there's other things for me to do. So I'm quite sure that anesthesiologists and anesthesiologists have like paperwork and other things that they have to do. So that just seems really ridiculous to just be like, oh, it was canceled. And she just accepted it. Like, that's what's even more bizarre about it. She was just like, oh, okay, that's fine. You could come back home and go to bed. Like, it's just, I don't know, it was crazy to me. Now, towards the end of March 2015, not too long after Deborah and Shad witnessed John saying that he could take, you know, her daughter Jacqueline out from, you know, 1,000 miles away, they actually went through, you know, John's drawers. Deborah went through John's desk and she found paperwork from his previous arrests. He had paperwork from that dating site printed out showing all these women talking bad about him. A lot of bank accounts written down. All of this information that really incriminated him. And so Deborah felt very scared, and she actually asked her family to help her move out of that apartment. And it was really perfect timing because John actually checked himself into the hospital for back pain, and he got some sort of like back surgery during that time. And it was actually found out later on that he was doing this off and on when he would run out of medications that he had stolen from the hospital. He would check back in and get, you know, all drugged up because he was, you know, addicted to this stuff, right? In June 2016, John and Deborah actually reconciled. He told her he wanted to change, that he wanted to do better, that he couldn't live without her, and he was just so upset that they had broken up, and he just wanted a chance to make it right with her, and she gave in and took him back. Once Deborah's family found out that she had taken John back, she basically was like cut out. They went out of their way to not contact Deborah or John. They wanted to have nothing to do with either one of them, and that was perfect for John because he was able to have Deborah all to herself, or all to himself rather, and you know, it was perfect for him. He loved it. And John would even send threatening letters to her daughters and to Shad saying that Deborah didn't love him anymore, but they knew that it wasn't her because it was like all the words were misspelled and it was really bad grammar. And Deborah was like, a well-educated, smart woman, and they knew that she, didn't speak that way. So they immediately knew that, he was just trying to get them out of her life completely. Now, John's erratic behavior and her loneliness that she felt from, basically being cut out from her family caused Deborah to file for an annulment in March 2016. And she tried to get a restraining order against John because he was becoming more and more, violent and being very angry with her and bossing her around about her money and yelling at her if she took money out and things like that. But because he had moved states conveniently, he moved to Nevada, they did not grant her a restraining order because they felt like it wasn't necessary. And on June 11th, 2016, John was caught on surveillance camera at Deborah's office trying to steal her car. And he took it, and it was like about a block away. It was really close, and the car was completely covered in gasoline, and it had some like burn marks on it, a little bit of fire damage, but John actually failed to completely set the car on fire, which we believe was his like actual, motive, what he wanted to do. Where the story really comes to a head is on August 2016, Jacqueline called Tara and said that she saw John sitting outside of her apartment in, really late at night. Jacqueline was just coming home and she saw him, and she, tried to alert the police, but they really didn't do anything about it. And so she just wanted to let Tara know, like, he's in the area, so be cautious. And Tara actually recently moved back to California, I believe, because her and her boyfriend stopped seeing each other, and she moved into Irving in an apartment building. And this apartment building was actually not really a great place to live. People often said that there would be domestic violence going on and people would ignore it. They would not help somebody if they heard someone out screaming. And her apartment building was actually facing like a really large parking lot, which, people can just like park their cars and leave it there and go do something and then come back. And it just was kind of like a sketchy place to live, but that's all she could afford at the time. So Tara quickly came home with her dog Cash, and she was actually on her way to a Jason Aldean concert. I believe she just like forgot the tickets and she had to come home and grab them real quick. And as she was getting out of her car, John came rushing up to her and said, "Do you remember me?" And he actually had a knife in a like Del Taco bag, and he was trying to push her back into the car. And he put his hand over her mouth, and Tara bit his hand. And this caused her dog Cash to go crazy and start biting his like leg and ankles. And basically her and John like wrestled to the ground, and they were fighting in like, a very intense, like, close fight. And John was trying to like stab at her, and he did end up cutting her like a couple times. But she actually started like pedal kicking him. And in the show that they did about this, you can see she's like, it's like you look like you're pedaling a bike, kicking him, as she actually kicked the knife out of his hand. And it's a good thing because Tara was actually wearing really thick rain boots because she worked at like a doggy daycare, a dog adoption center type thing. And so she was wearing like her work, clothes, and she was wearing like thick boots, and she was able to like kick the knife like right out of his hand. And so she was able to grab it, and she ended up stabbing John 13 times, including once in the eye. Once police arrived to the scene, they administered CPR, and they were able to bring John's pulse back. Now, he was taken to the hospital, and he was completely, announced brain dead at this point, okay? And in his car, which he rented a 2016 Dodge Dart, he actually removed the license plate, so it'd be harder to find. It was, in that parking lot. And in his car, they found what they called, a kidnapping kit. He had a vial of injectable testosterone, he had cable ties, he had camouflage duct tape, and a set of kitchen knives. So this is all very suspicious. So in my personal opinion, I think that he was going to go after Tara and then continue to go after other people. So he may have gone after Deborah next, or Jacqueline, or even Shad. And, I feel like he would have just kept going with this because John's behavior at this point was so out of control. Who, would have known what he's done? And it's alleged that he killed his father. So, I wouldn't put it out of the realm of possibility that he would have killed her. On August 24th, 2016, his sister Karen actually made the decision to pull the plug on him because he was announced brain dead, and there is no way that he would possibly come back and be okay, after this. He was like in a coma, completely gone. And Deborah actually did not want to make that decision, so she gave up rights, and so they called the next of line and kin. And Donna really didn't have anything to do with him, and she had like restraining orders against him, so they contacted Karen. And this case in general is just so bizarre to me and insane. Like, it just seems like something out of a horror movie. I actually was talking to like a family member about this case, the show, and they didn't know that the show was based on true stories. I don't know if they just didn't notice that it says it in the beginning, but they didn't know. And it just seems like so unreal and something that just couldn't happen. John, got away with so many crimes over the years. He hurt so many people, took advantage of so many people, and I just feel really bad for them, but this is like, I feel like it's so helpful because it shows people that it's really easy to get lured in. And if you are especially having trouble in regards to love and you want to find somebody, you're willing to accept, really terrible behavior from some people and maybe miss a lot of red flags. So I definitely feel like the show coming out and then the podcast called Dirty John is really popular. I feel like it definitely helps shine a light on, how some people can really get tricked, right? And many people have come forward and talked about John, his wife Tanya, his ex-wife Tanya, of course Deborah and Tara, and Shad has talked about it several times. Even people that he went to like college with have talked about it, and they were the ones that told them that they had rented all kinds of credit cards in other people's names, and he had done all kinds of crimes in high school, really terrible things even in college and high school. So he definitely was not a good person, and the world is probably a little bit of a better place without him, because if he got away with, hurting or killing Tara, who knows what he would have done next. And it's just crazy to me that he just never got any like severe jail time. If you look at someone's record and see, okay, they've done this, this, and this, maybe we should give them a longer sentence, but that didn't happen. And that often happens when a criminal jumps from state to state and they've lived so many places. The states don't communicate very well with each other, and they just, kind of want to get rid of that person. So they just give them a short sentence and send them off on their way. So thank you so much for watching this video, guys. I really appreciate it. If you're interested, please check out my TikTok. I do shorter versions of cases on there, just really short, brief things, just talking about different cases and things like that. I'm going to do one of this case as well. That will be linked in my description if you guys care to check that out. And I hope you guys subscribe if you're interested in true crime. I'm going to do a case a week. Some weeks I'm even going to be putting out 2 cases. So if you guys are interested in that, please hit that subscribe. It really helps me out a lot. And also feel free to leave me a comment if there are any cases that you would like me to cover in the future, okay? So thank you so much, and I hope you all have a great day and stay safe. Bye-bye.